All right, so we're gonna get started because it is time, and Alicia has a full dance card. So she'll be
just timing wise.
she'll be dipping out a few minutes early. So thank you all for coming and supporting romance authors and supporting indie bookstores and Bookstore Romance Day. I so appreciate it. And even though things are weird and hard, this kind of situation makes it easier for all of us to get together and not have to worry about if a romance author is going on tour and if they can afford to come to your city. So this has been great. I'm a bookseller at Belmont Books. My name's Amanda. I also write for Smart Bitches Trashy Books, which is a romance blog for those of you who do not know. And I love all of these authors. I'm so excited. Some of them have provided signed book plates and swag and cool stuff. So if you buy their book through Belmont, you'll get those. I know Tash Skilton supplied some, Priscilla supplied some. And I'm just so excited. We also have like romance totes, which random people will be getting.
Random people.
Random people. Well, we have like a small number, so it's like Willy Wonka's golden
Lucky
ticket.
people. Fabulous people.
So we'll see. But I would like the authors to introduce themselves, and then we'll just get right into it.
Okay, I'm gonna go first.
Yes.
I'm Farah Heron. I'm the author of The Chai Factor. Came out, oh my God, it feels like forever ago. It came out in June 2019, back when the world was somewhat normal and made sense. But my next book is coming out March 9th from Forever. It's called Accidentally Engaged. And I'm really, really excited to start talking about that book.
Yay.
I'm Savana's Tash. I'm one half of Tash Skilton. This is our book, Ghosting a Love Story. So this is my first adult romance book, but I have 4 other books that I wrote solo. This is the first book that Sarah and I wrote together. It's a rom-com about 2 dating profile ghostwriters who don't know they're writing to each other, and in real life they hate each other. So it's kind of
I will say that ghosting is my current staff pick at Belmont Books. So.
Is Sarah?
Sarah.
I think she just went on mute.
Let me unmute her.
Oh, there she is.
There she is.
Sorry, I have a voice. Thank you. Yes, I'm the other half of Tash Skilton, and Sarvana has introduced our book Ghosting, which came out like right when the pandemic was like at its peak. So we're happy to be here and have an event to do with everybody. I've also written a rom-com called A Fame Adjacent. Oh, look, it's like, there you go. And that is about a former child star who was on a 1990s song and dance show. It's the Mickey Mouse Club, but it's we don't reference that. It's just the assumption. So she, 25 years later, is the only person who didn't become famous. You know, there's the Britneys and the Justins and the Christinas and the Carrie Russells and Ryan Gosling. And here she is. She's the only one who's not famous. And when they have a 25th anniversary, she's not invited. And she decided to crash the event. But she has to get across the country in like 3 days. So that's my my other rom-com. And then I also wrote a murder mystery called Club Deception that takes place in an underground magic club. My husband's a magician, and so I got to spy on him and his friends for that one.
Hola everyone, I am Priscilla Oliveras. I write contemporary romance with a Latinx flavor, and there's a gnat like flying around all of a sudden. So if you see me doing this, it's not that, but I'm like, where did this gnat come from? So I write-
It's a romance reader, that's what it is.
It's a romance reader, yes, it's excited. So my latest novel is Island Affair. It's book 1 in my Keys to Love series about the Navarro familia. They're a Cuban family that like 3rd generation in Key West, and all of the siblings and their dad are firefighter paramedics. And in Island Affair, it's a fake relationship romance. She's a social media influencer who's just arrived in Key West for what she knows is going to be an uncomfortable family vacation, and she's stood up by her loser boyfriend. And so she convinces Luis, the second Navajo sibling, to stand in as her pretend boyfriend for the week. And so that's kind of the gist of this book. And I will say, Sarah and I also, I think we can share the title, but there's no cover yet, but Sarah and I will be in an anthology next summer. It's set in New York City, and it's called Summer in the City. And so I'm super excited about that one as well. That one's coming out next June, but so hopefully soon it'll be up on pre-order.
Yes.
All right, Alicia?
Sure. I'm sorry, I'm still distracted by Sarah's husband being a magician. That's
Yeah, when I learned that, I was like, what? Tell me more.
yes, let's just talk about that for an hour because I'm very interested in that. But
Can we bring him out?
Can you do a trick?
He's wrangling my son at the moment, but he
Cool.
might pop in. Who knows?
Gosh, that's so cool. Something new to add to my looking for list now. I'm Alicia Rai, and my latest series is called Modern Love. This is the first book in the series. It's called The Right Swipe. And this is my little quarantine release called Girl Gone Viral. And the series is about 3 women. They're roommates. They're also tech entrepreneurs. And in Girl Gone Viral, she goes viral kind of against her will. She is in a coffee shop and someone live tweets a conversation she's having with this random guy, and makes it out so that she's having some sort of grand romance, and suddenly the entire internet is on the hunt for this, girl in a cafe. The problem is she has panic disorder, anxiety, and so this is kind of her worst nightmare. So luckily she has a handsome bodyguard, which we all should have, I guess, and he whisks her away to his family's beach farm in Northern California. And, forced proximity works its magic. So that's my love.
Not only did Alicia drop a book during quarantine, she dropped a YouTube channel during quarantine.
I did. It's called Quarantine Cuisine. Nobody has to watch it, but I would appreciate it if they did. It's just me being goofy in my kitchen and my mom trying to teach me how to cook from long distance. So
It's great.
yeah, I appreciate it.
Smash that like button, hit the bell, subscribe.
Please. Every time I do an episode, the editor is like, "You didn't say to subscribe and like," and I'm like, "I'm so into this."
So after this is my last panel of the day. I started with historical, I went sci-fi fantasy, and now we're doing contemporary. And one thing that I find interesting about contemporary novels, and we talked about this in book club too, is that you have to create a believable sense of place, because you're going to get an angry email that this road doesn't butt up against that road, and clearly you've never been to Chicago because places don't look like this, or that sort of thing. So I want to talk about a contemporary setting, why you chose the cities that you did, because they have to become a character of themselves, and you do have a duty to get it right, and what kind of drew you to putting your stories in these well-known places. So Farah, we'll start with you.
So my books are set in Toronto, and that was kind of important to me because I'm from Toronto and I hadn't seen a lot of books set here. Toronto is extremely multicultural. I think it's currently the most multicultural city in the world. You find literally everything on the street corners here. And I really wanted that kind of feeling in the book. I wanted it to make sense that these people from different communities and different backgrounds were all together and friends. And that's how things are here. But you're right that I was kind of worried about getting things wrong and about what people would say. It's funny with the Chai Factor, it never really mentions I think once it may have a little mention of what neighborhood it is in, but I've had several people that are like, you totally nailed East York. That feels like East York. And even a restaurant that I changed the name of the restaurant, but people are like, that's based on Amsterdam, right? And yeah, that is totally what it was based on. So there's a couple of things that people have kind of noticed, which makes me feel like I did that well. We'll see with the other ones. I mean, I think I love the idea of writing a small town romance and making up a small town so I don't have to worry about things like that.
Yeah.
And I can totally understand why so many people do that small town thing. I'd like to make up a giant city too one day. Who knows?
Priscilla.
Oh, mine is set in Key West, and I lived in Key West. My dad was in the Navy, so we moved to Key West the summer before my 7th grade year. So junior high, high school, and then even college and early married life. If I was like going home was Key West. So I always knew I wanted to set a story or a series. Actually, the first romance I wrote, which was wrong for like a whole bunch of reasons. It was actually set in Key West. But so this series was just wanting to like take readers home with me to the island that I love. So I tried really hard to, and I will say it's changed a lot since I was a kid. So I did rely on like Google, Google Satellite, or unfortunately I had to go to Key West a couple times.
Oh, darn.
For research, bummer. But we've got, since I moved back to Florida, I try to go back a couple times a year. Actually, my sister and I will go back to run the Key West Half Marathon. And so, we exercise and then we also enjoy the island. But so I tried really hard to, there are some restaurants, like when Luis and Sarah go dancing at El Mesón de Pepe, right on Mallory Square, that's something that we do every time we go. Now they mention, like in book 2, the hero, his familia has a Cuban restaurant, and that's all pretend, but I envision it where there used to be a restaurant called Bees, that when we were in high school and we were allowed to leave for lunch, we would go to Bees for lunch. And so that's, in my mind, that's where Miranda's is. Now it's like something totally different. But so I tried, my goal with the series is really, if a reader has been to Key West, I want them to feel like they revisit it again. And if they haven't been, then I want them to feel like they stopped at mile marker 0 downtown and they took a picture with Sarah, or they were on Mallory Square and watching the sunset celebration. And so they feel like they've visited my home, or the place that I still think of as home.
I was so happy that your book had the Hemingway house and mentioned
Yes.
that, and all the cats. I've only been to Key West once when I was a kid, and that was the ultimate thing I could think of, was a house full of cats. And I was excited to see that referenced in there.
Oh, good. Well, so that's why it was set there, just wanting to take readers home. I did another series for Thule, and we created a little beach town called Paradise Key. But what we did with that, we took Cedar Key, which is on the Florida Gulf Coast, and we turned it into our own. And so we looked at like the city map, and we just, the Java Hut's going to be on the corner of 2nd and whatever, and gave it its own name, and then just populated it with ourselves. And that was really fun too. But this series is extra special just because I'm hoping people feel like they visited my home.
If you love seafood, which I do not, Cedar Key has a huge seafood festival
yes.
every year.
They do.
Which I would always be dragged to and just eat funnel cake all day. It's the only thing I could eat. So Sarvanaz and Sarah, you had the difficult job of setting it in New York.
Well, I live in New York.
Yes, but I feel like New York is so, the boroughs especially all have their own personalities. So it's like 5 mini places in one.
Yeah. So when we kind of came up with this idea, I always wanted to write like a love letter to Nora Ephron, because her movies meant so much to me as a writer and just as a person. And this concept kind of really fit really well into that. And so I don't think we ever discussed anywhere else. It just made sense that it would be New York. Obviously, Nora's stuff a lot of times took place in New York, but I've lived in New York City for 15 years, so it's home to me. So it wasn't that hard to, kind of place them somewhere or know what that neighborhood was like. I'm actually terrible at geography normally. I'm like god awful. But like but I was like, I like took out my Google Maps. I'm like, okay, this is where the cafe, it's on Avenue A, and like this is the subway they would have to take. I made sure it was all accurate to what actual subway lines they would take to go where they were going. But I do hope that New York is like you said, a character in the book, because and Miles particularly, who is so actually it worked out well, because in my character, Miles is a New Yorker, native New Yorker, and Sarah's character, Zoe, is an LA transplant who hates New York. And so it worked out really well, because she doesn't really know what she's doing or where she's going. And he's like, this is the greatest place on earth, and if you don't think so, like, you're just wrong. So, so it was fun to kind of play with that. And also, like, I feel that way about New York. Like, it's home to me. And right now that everything is, like, shut down and so bizarre, it's like, it's very difficult because it's not New York. It's something else that I hope one day transforms back into New York. But yeah, I mean, I loved writing it, and it was great that I could be like, oh, I could actually go visit this street and, you know, look at it and just write down sensory details and stuff. And but Sarah, to her credit, I will say, she wrote a lot of the New York scenes too, like the High Line, and she did an amazing job writing that. So she might want to talk about that as well.
Yeah, I think originally, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarv, I think initially we were going to have them both be New Yorkers. And I was so daunted by that I was like, you know what? If she's just from California and is like scared of walking around and not being in her car and going on the subway, I could write that character, because that is how I feel when I visit New York. So we turned like a potential weakness into a defining trait of the character that I was writing. So I was like, I'll just make her like me in this regard. And luckily, anytime I had a question like, okay, where the heck is this? Sarv could just immediately tell me. So that was such a huge help. And it worked for our characters, because since we were writing the book together, we each took a POV person. Hers was Miles and mine was Zoe, and we alternated chapters and POVs. And I thought it might be cute to mention the UK version of the book is called Mismatched in Manhattan. Oh, and they did a really cute picture with just a taxi and the bridge behind it.
Actually from Brooklyn, that spot is like in Brooklyn. I know exactly where it is when I saw it, yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. And it was interesting because I guess according to the editor in London, she said books set in Manhattan are really sort of popular or for Londoners, which makes sense, because books set in London, I'm always like, ooh, let me read that. So I guess it works both ways. And I thought that was kind of cute that they changed the title and made it very, you know, New York specific on the cover, which was cute.
One thing I did like about the New York aspects in Ghosting was that, and no shade to other romance writers, but both characters have such a hard time finding a place to live. Like, Miles is crashing on a friend's couch. Zoe lives in this very teeny tiny apartment. I liked that, you know, they didn't live in fancy brownstones, and you think, how the hell can they afford this New York rent and a brownstone? I enjoyed that. Alicia, you are bi-coastal, right? For the most part?
For the most part. So I lived on the East Coast for a long time, and I just moved to Southern California about 2 years ago. And most of my previous books, I would set them in like fictional towns that were loosely, very closely based on real towns. But when I did the Modern Love series, I really wanted it to sort of feel like all the heroines are transplants to Southern California. So a lot of it is kind of working through, you know, the things that I noticed and the things that I love about this place. And one of the things that I really love about California is how easy it is to explore the rest of California. So with Girl Gone Viral, it takes place mostly in Yuba City, California, which is a little itty bitty town north of Sacramento. And the reason it caught my attention is, one, that it is the largest producer of peaches in our country. It's where the peaches come from, oddly enough, not Georgia. Wow. And two, I know. Two, it is one of the largest settlements of Punjabi people in America. And it's not just like first or second generation, you know, Punjabi people, it's like third, fourth, fifth generation, which is odd for South Asians, because the Asian Exclusion Acts passed in 1917. It pretty much barred South Asian immigration into America until 1965. So most of us who are here are like, you know, the children or maybe the grandchildren now of people who immigrated after 1965. But there are like huge swaths of mostly Punjabi men who came here before 1917 to work on the railroads, to work on the farms. And, you know, they weren't permitted to own land. They weren't permitted to marry anybody who wasn't, you know, because the anti-miscegenation laws, they couldn't marry outside their race. So what they did was they got pretty crafty, which I think all immigrants kind of do. And they realized that the clerks couldn't tell shades of brown apart. And so they married Mexican women. And so Yuba City kind of became this big community of like Punjabi, Mexican, like a hybrid community, a farming community. And, you know, they couldn't own the land, but when their children were born, their children could own the land. So that's how these like huge peach and plum farms in Yuba City got started, just by these, you know, very crafty people who like figured out a way to work the system to their advantage, and had kids and had a community, and, you know, built sort of their home there. And it was a place where they could build their home, because a lot of them, you know, sort of got chased out of a lot of other places. So that was the reason, you know, I went there. And I actually, you know, I visited there on very foolishly in the summer, because it gets to be like 800 degrees. Like it was 100 degrees. My car just stopped. Like it just stopped. I passed the city sign and it just ended. And I was
And
like,
we're done. We're done here.
And what do I do? And so this very nice man came and like helped me push it into the shade, like so friendly, gave me directions, told me where to go eat lunch while I was like waiting for it to cool down. So that was, and it was just such a delight. Like the place has, like, it's so small. You could, you know, everybody's so friendly. There's literally a taco truck on every corner. There is, you know, Indian restaurants everywhere, and three Sikh temples there, or Sikh temples. So it's amazing. Like it is just a lovely little town. And so I really wanted it to be like its own little character in the book. And I hope the farm sort of is its own little character.
So I'm going to ask, I think, the most difficult question I have now, so we can get it out of the way.
Not a minute.
Take a sip. Take a gulp, actually, Priscilla. Just chug it. You'll be great. So all of the books in today's panel feature characters of color. And I've noticed in all of the books and backlist, there are moments where these characters experience moments that I feel like maybe we haven't necessarily seen in like the white contemporary canon. There are moments of microaggressions, racism, mental health, disordered eating, that sort of thing. And with the events of RWA this year, I can't help but think like if these authors received kind of pushback in a way for putting these serious topics in this sort of keep romance nice world, if that makes sense. But for a lot of people, these are very real lived experiences. And I'm sure these characters speak to people who aren't white heteronormative individuals. So is that something that you are always very conscious of when writing, in terms of character experiences, especially from authors and characters of color, and how they might be perceived by primarily white readers?
I've had someone ask me like on a different panel somewhere, if I'm not Latinx, you know, will I, you know, really like be able to identify or like get into your book? And my basic answer is it's a romance, right? It's two people who are going through crappy times and growing and learning and facing things, and that's all of us across the board, however we identify, whatever our background is. Being Latinx, Sarah's not Latina in this book. Most of my books, both of the main characters are Latinx, but that is a part of who they are. That's not all they are. I do feel a responsibility. The reason why I choose to write Latinx, Latinx rom, because I don't feel there's enough representation across the board. I write, they're Cubans, a Cuban familia, but I'm Mexican American and Puerto Riqueña. And I choose to write about stories that are, that show like what my family looks like, what my friends look like. But like I said, this is a mixed romance because that's what my world is like. I don't just hang out with Puerto Riqueñas. And even in my group of Latinx amigas, we're from all over, different Latinx countries. And there's even diversity within that. I just feel that it's important for there to be books on the shelf, adult books and kids books, that someone on the other end can pick it up at the library, can pick it up at the bookstore, can download it to their device and see someone that looks or sounds or feels or believes or, acts in a way that they do or their familia does, so that they see themselves and in the books that they're reading.
You can have another sip of wine now, Priscilla.
Yes. Let me get off my soapbox. Sorry.
No, it's good.
For me, I also, I've been lucky to not get much pushback from my editors or anything. I've usually have diverse characters in my books, and I think like Priscilla, like Miles is, he calls himself a Jerusalem because he's half Egyptian and half Jewish American, which is actually my own family because I'm Muslim and my husband's Jewish. And so it was just like a fun thing for me to put in there. We always joke with our kids are Jerusalems. But I'm Iranian, I'm not Egyptian, but it was, it's close enough to my experience that I felt comfortable writing that. I write lighthearted books with diverse characters, and one of the reasons I do that is because I think it's important that they're also allowed to have light, funny stories. Not everything has to be like deep, not deep, like serious and like, and obviously like these are issues that you deal with every day, but you also fall in love and you have like comedic moments and you have these like other things that are happening. And just because you are different background doesn't mean you don't have these universal human experiences. So a lot of times for me, like their diversity is important, and I really think about it in terms of the character and how it affects the story and how it affects them and how they live, but I also don't make it a focal point of the story. And I think also it's important for me to like kind of take these spaces like rom-coms, which generally are very white, straight, spaces, and have other people live in them and have the same things happen to them that happen to white straight people,
Farah,
or
Yeah.
can I say something real fast about since mentioned about like our editors? I will say Kensington's been really good with me about with the multicultural aspects. Anything, like my first editor said, we know that that's your area, and I'm not gonna question that, in your books. And so they've been super supportive. I've never gotten any kind of pushback about whether something, where someone's wanting me to put something stereotypical and I need to say no. Kensington's been super supportive about that.
Yeah, my experiences with my editors have also been great, similar to Priscilla's. My Chai Factor was with HarperCollins, and I had no issues. They were very happy with the amount of racial issues that I put in it, and then same thing with Forever. But it was interesting, I did get a lot of feedback from reviewers and people, especially with Chai Factor. I found the theme of the book is about racism and about intolerance. And I mean, I didn't really set out to write that story, but that's kind of what the story happened. I started writing it not long after there was a big violent incident here in Canada in a mosque where a bunch of where white supremacists came in and killed a bunch of people praying. That's really sad to talk about right now. But so that was kind of in my frame of mind. It was about how hard it is to continue on with our everyday life as a Muslim when these things are happening in our own backyards. So that's kind of where my headspace was when I wrote it. But at the same time, I'm not capable. I'm not capable of not writing rom-com. I tried to be serious once, it didn't work. So I'm writing a rom-com, and it's silly. It's a book about a barbershop quartet. It's a silly book. There's lots of jokes. So I did have people saying that they found that you can't have a rom-com that talks about serious issues. They're like, well, I wouldn't call it a rom-com because there were serious issues in it. And I felt like saying, is it that you just don't want to have to be kind of confronted with your own biases in a rom-com? Because a lot of rom-coms have serious issues. It's kind of a thing in a rom-com where the heroine is down on her luck. Maybe she doesn't have a place to live, or she loses her job. Those are also serious issues. I'm not saying that racism is worse or better, but those are very serious issues that happen in rom-coms all the time. But as soon as I put that serious issue being confronting white supremacy and confronting racism, I was just like, really? So now it's not a rom-com because you had to kind of think about the way your biases affect the world around you? So yeah, I did get pushback on that. It's interesting that that book, Chai Factor, was interracial. My next book, Accidentally Engaged, is not. It definitely does not have the same kind of themes of intolerance. It's there because it's part of our lives as Muslims, but it's not as big a deal. But at the same time, I think people might feel, because it's not interracial and the hero is an immigrant, he's very new to the country. So I think it's kind of a different story where there's less to ground people. There's more of the cultural aspect in the story. So it'll be interesting what people say about that.
Alicia?
But I think that's good because you're showing different aspects of an different, different things that that we confront. Like what you face, what I face, are different, and it's important to have that in books.
And just because I'm a South Asian Muslim, my experience isn't the same as somebody that's newer to the country, as somebody that's maybe a different religion or a different culture. Yeah, exactly.
Alicia?
Yeah, I think pushback is, inevitable anytime you try to do something that's slightly different. I've been dealing with it for years, but I think at the same time, what is it? Books are windows or they're mirrors. Like, you can either look into someone else's life or you can look into your own, and both are really important for people to read and consume. So I think that's sort of always been my guiding principle, and, just do no harm with that. I think this is just a part of contemporary world building. Like, I have to write the world as I see it, or people will put the book down because it won't look like the reality that is reflected to them. And I have written, the Forbidden Heart series was a small town romance. I intended it as such, and it's rarely classified as a small town series. And the reason is because everybody is predominantly, Asian or brown or Black, or, they're not what a small town, what romance has led you to believe up till now a small town looks like. But I lived in those towns. I was there. The fact that I was there means that that's not what those towns look like. So I think it is just important to keep your head down and to just keep, true to the reality that you see. And slowly people, they'll look around maybe and they'll go, oh, right. Like all those other things that we've consumed over the years telling us that this is what a farm looks like. This is what, a small town looks like. Maybe those things weren't exactly true to reality. So I think that's what it is. I think if you are committed to what's real and what are facts and, what the world really looks like, I think, you start to realize, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
That is the hardest question I have. So we've gotten through it. So what I want to know is, as contemporary romance authors, what is your favorite scene to write? Is it the introduction? Is it the grovel? Is it, the naughty stuff? What do you enjoy writing in your romances?
Oh, definitely the meet cute. The first time we get on the page together. There's so much potential.
I second that, definitely. The banter and how they connect and how they initially view each other and how that changes over the course of the book. I think the meet cute, and I like the naughty stuff too, but the meet cute in particular.
Priscilla?
That's a hard question. I want to say, like, I feel the most emotional connection with them, like when they've made that like after, and it doesn't have to be like a sex scene, but when the first time that they kind of have that emotional connection, that I hope that the reader, even if they're not ready yet, but that the reader can finally see, like, yes, see, they are the ones. If they can just fix all the, you know, all the crap that's going on around them, they are the perfect ones for each other. So that moment when I'm hoping I've done it right, and so the reader realizes that. But so it can be it's different times in different books.
I call that the just kiss already moment.
Yes, yeah. So I think that's it for me. Also, like the end, like by then, by the time I get to the end, like I know them so well, and their whole story is like this movie here, and I'm trying to get it down on the page, and I just want them to finally have their HEA or their HFN, their happily for now, whichever one it's going to be for them. And so like finally writing that, I'm like, yes. So that's like a good feeling.
Alicia?
I just like scenes where they're nice to each other.
Boring. That one's boring.
I'm really tired right now, and I just want to be nice to each other. So when I wrote Girl Gone Viral, I mean, honestly, that was my whole like guiding principle. I was like, I just want to write two nice people who are falling in love with each other, who have fallen in love with each other, and that's it. And they're going to be really nice to each other. In fact, they're going to be so nice to each other, it might become a problem. So that was my whole principle. And I think, you know, those are the scenes I love, where they're bantering or they're like having fun together and, you know, discovering things about each other that they love, or, you know, that they're falling in like with, like that. Those are just, I think those are the best parts of a relationship. And I think those are, you know, the best parts of writing too.
Sarvanas?
I think the kind of the opposite, because hate to love is my favorite trope.
Ooh.
And I also love the meet cute. So like the meet hate. So that kind of like banter where they, you know, like underneath is obviously all this like sexual tension, but underneath they're like bickering. I love writing that, but I love writing dialogue in general. And banter is just like the most fun part of writing for me, is to just write kind of like these perfect, the way it doesn't work in real life, where you can just, they have the perfect comebacks and like it's all so witty and like quippy, and I love it, because I'm so awkward in real life, and I never know what to say or when to say it at the right time. So I'm like, in this one world, everything can be like perfect.
So I have one more question before we'll take chat questions. So chat, get ready. What is one trope that you feel like you really haven't written in that you would like to experiment with in future books?
It's a tough one.
I know.
So I had wanted to write a second chance story, but I was struggling with it, and then I ended up writing one. So I'm just gonna plug another book. I have a story. I have a story in an anthology that's coming out next month. It's called Love All Year, and it is an anthology of non-Western holidays. Like it's got a couple of Jewish holidays. Mine's an Eid holiday. There's a Juneteenth story. So that's coming out next month. And I wrote, because it was the first time I really tried to write something small. So I'm like, this isn't my chance to try that second chance. So there are high school sweethearts that randomly meet at an Eid fair and reconnect that way. So that was the trope that I was like, I don't know if I can do it, and I did it. So
How was the novella writing experience?
I was terrified, because I write really long. Like, I don't write even short novels. I just talk too much. So it was tricky, but I think that having the chemistry between them already there, and the characters I already knew. They're characters that are in my next book in Accidentally Engaged, so it kind of takes place before that. So the characters were already in my head. I think it would have been harder if it wasn't characters I already knew, because it takes me that long to get to know the character. It takes me however long a novella is to really understand them, and then I was like, okay, then I would just have to scrap everything at that point and start over. So it was good. I'm excited for the story. I think I'm excited for the whole anthology. I've read a couple of them, and they're so far really good.
When is the anthology out?
Oh, I want to say it's end of September. It's called Love All Year. And I think it's around end of September. The pre-order hasn't gone up yet.
I don't know if I'll ever actually do this because I really just can't wrap my head around how this would work. But a trope that terrifies me would be secret baby.
Yeah.
And I just don't know how you kind of work that into today's era, or what sort of characters you'd have to come up with for that to seem like a viable trope. But that's kind of on my, you know, bucket list of things that would be terrifying for me, and therefore I think probably at some point I'll do it. Like I genre hop a lot. I've written a murder mystery, I've written 2 rom-coms, I've written like a YA martial arts book, I've written like basically whatever I like to read, I've tried my hand at. Whether it worked or not, I don't know, but I gave it a shot. And so things that scare me or things that I feel like I could never write just naturally makes me curious to see if in fact I could write it.
I'm probably the same trope because as in my real life, right? So as a mom, I think of all of the things that I would have missed if someone had like my secret baby, right? If someone had my baby and they didn't tell me. So I need to have like some really strong, like strong motivation for why you kept my baby from me and for me to ever be able to forgive you. So that's how I would go into the book. So I feel like, I don't know that I could ever write it unless I'd have to like tackle that motivation. And I would say, and Tiff Marcello already put it in here in the chat, and I was like, Tiff, that's what I was gonna say. Mona Schroff, she has a book that came out earlier this year that is a secret baby. So if you're looking for a good secret baby, Mona's, I think they put the title in here, maybe Then, Now, Always.
Awesome.
But we had this discussion because we were in a Zoom, like a virtual event earlier this year. And for me, that would probably be the one that I would shy away from the most, is the secret baby, because I would really have to know the heroine. For me to be able to write her and feel bad for her, like she'd need to have some really strong motivation, because even going in, I would be siding with the hero. Like, what the hell? Did you keep my baby, right? So I'd have to like really, I think, tackle that, just because I personally think about all of the firsts with my girls that are so important to me that you would have missed, right? If the kid's 10, if the kid's 11, if whatever. So it'd probably be a good challenge, because I'd have to really, really know why, because I would need to be able to empathize with that mom or with whoever, caused the baby to be secret, unless they turned out to be a bad person, right? Anyway.
Alicia?
Meanwhile, I'm like, I want my child support. There's no way in hell I'm keeping my baby secret from anyone.
Money. Very good. Yeah.
Hire a skywriter, like that man would know that there's a baby coming. I think for me, my main was, I grew up on soap operas, and so I always loved the amnesia tropes. So where like someone gets bumped on the head and they forget like 2 things, and then they fall in love all over again with someone, or they maybe fall in love with someone they haven't met before, or they wouldn't have before, and then they get bumped again and they're just fine. But I think I know like just enough about medicine to know that that's implausible, and so I haven't written it yet. I don't know if like everyone can just shut their brains off and let me write it and believe that it's true. I will write it.
I'll have to say, I had a hard time with the fake relationship trope with this one, because I'm not a risk taker. So like if Sarah was my friend and she was telling me, hey, I talked this hunky firefighter into being my fake boyfriend, I'd be like, are you crazy?
Stranger danger.
Yeah, right. So I even was a little skeptical, like trying to make sure that, I hope in the beginning of Island Affair, I give her enough, like, she feels enough pressure that she would do this crazy thing, because I personally would not be able to do this crazy thing, but I want to go on that journey with her, or I wanted to. So hopefully, but I think that's good when, as an author, when you stretch yourself in that way, or if you're feeling uncomfortable, then maybe that's a good thing. I hope anyway.
Sarvanas, what would you like to write?
Oh, is she?
Oh, she pieced out. It's fine. She'll be back. She'll be back. So Kelly asks, looking ahead, what do you want to see more of in romance?
Ooh. I mean, my first answer is more diversity, more books like that on the shelf, more diversity across on our side of the table, on the covers, you know, and industry professionals. But I want, as a Latinx rom author, I want our little group to keep growing.
Yeah, I'm with you, Priscilla. I'd love to see white authors add more diversity to their worlds, maybe not as their main characters, but their surrounding characters, the people around them, the person in the coffee shop. I'm tired of seeing all white big cities in romance, and I'd like that to change.
Sarah?
What I'd like to see more of, I'd echo what the other two authors have said. It's just not realistic. If you're gonna have it take place in the modern world, there should be a ton of diversity. And I also like when the tropes are a little bit subverted, like, you know what you're basically getting, but then maybe there's a twist you didn't see coming, or you take the readers are expecting a certain response because that's what they've seen the last 10 times for that trope, and you just veer. You still hit the beats that are required to have it be a satisfying read, but that you maybe take a little twist for that, and try to take it into a new direction. I always find that really fun.
Alicia?
Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of love retellings a lot because of that reason, because they can be subverted and twisted on their head in a lot of ways. I will say, like, it is nice to see more authors who look like you, because I have been doing this for a very long time, and after 10 years or so, having like the weight of your book being everything for everyone in a lot of ways sometimes is very, very exhausting, because you kind of get it from both ends. You get it from people who have never seen it before, you get it from others who have seen it, because it's not perfectly their representation. So having, I think, more authors who share your experience, or maybe who don't share it but might also write similarly to you, like, this table is more than big enough. I am happy, like very, very happy whenever I see a new face at it. Because it just means, for us to all, like, we can all kind of share in that load.
So Leslie asks, and Sarva's back.
Sorry.
It's okay. Leslie asks, now that our contemporary landscape has changed so drastically, how do you think that might be reflected in contemporary romance, whether your own or in general? My first thought was, like, on maybe like a smaller scale, is modern dating. And I see this a lot in Alicia's books, and she has extensive experience with modern dating. But the way, like, our dating landscape has changed in the last few years is something that I've been slowly seeing reflected in newer books. But I don't know, like, what else you think might be reflected in contemporary romance, either in your future books or just in general.
If she's, I'm not sure if the question is like COVID related, and I will, that's something that like author friends we've been talking about, and the books I'm writing now, like that, or revising now, that will come out next year. I'm still living, and my characters are still living in a pre-pandemic world, because we don't really know what the world will look like, hopefully, when we come out of it, right? So I'm not sure if that's what she's asking, or what I do like, that you see more and more in romance, that we're seeing more and more, and we're calling for more and more in the world in general, is strong women, strong female representation in our books, and the idea that a woman can have a healthy sexual relationship with herself, or with a partner. I think in general, I say that, and then I'm like, girl, you write closed door, but this is it, maybe, right? But so I think this is a conversation that I've had with my oldest daughter about the romance genre of the past, and what I think it is now, and how it's changed. So I hope that that's something, like with contemporary romance, I feel like that is something that most of us are aware of, the idea of consent, right? Whether it doesn't have to be a whole conversation, but it is addressed in some way, right? And birth control, how are we, you know, those kinds of topics that maybe weren't discussed before or weren't mentioned. I think it's important that they're mentioned now in our books in some way. And I feel like all of us here on this panel, at least on the books that I've read, those are things that we have, you know, we have shades of that are in our books.
That's a good point about, you know, like sexual health, is that in the romances I grew up reading, there was like no discussion of like pre-sexy times, like, hey, like, you know, that sort of like frank discussion. And it doesn't have to be something long and drawn out. It could just be like a quick question and like, you know, over and done with. But that is a very good point.
I do think, thanks to COVID, it's going to be hard for me to write like anytime. Like, where have they been? Have they been washing their hands? Like,
It's 10 pages of like a hot guy like washing his hands.
Have we done all the precautions here? I'm revising First Comes Light, which is the third book in Modern Love series right now, and I have actually revised it to not reflect COVID so much, but to reflect sort of the psychological, or what I think the psychological effects of it are going to be on our world and on dating for a while. I do think, I mean, I'm seeing, at least amongst my friends and stuff, there's definitely less of like a hookup culture right now, because they literally can't hook up. But it is like getting Austonian, like, you know, like they're sending locks of hair to each other. So I do think that maybe there might be a difference there, but just in terms of like, you know, how do we value family? Like, how do we value our time now? Like, what do we do with, you know, what are we doing with ourselves in this? And like, I think about my grandma died in, you know, she was born in 1922 after the Spanish flu, and she was traumatized by the Spanish flu. Like her parents and siblings would tell her about it, and she told me about it when I was little. So, you know, the effects of this are going to be long lasting. And so I think we have to sort of think about those in terms of like, what is our contemporary world going to look like after that? But I totally understand and respect, you know, like if like I love the books that just, you know, like they don't have any mention of that or anything. You know, happy to believe that, you know, somebody rolled a dice and we're in an alternate universe somewhere. COVID, but
I feel like having them wear masks. Are you having them wear masks?
I'm sorry?
Are you having them wear masks?
Oh, no, nothing like that. I'm talking more about like sort of the psychological aspect of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Alicia, do you have to run?
I do have to run, unfortunately.
Okay. Everyone say goodbye to Alicia. I'm so glad she stopped by.
Yeah. So nice to see everyone. Thanks for coming, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Sarah and Sarbanaz, what are your thoughts on the changing landscape and how it could affect future romances?
Well, in regards to COVID, it's funny because I'm working on a contemporary now, but it's actually not contemporary. It's kind of a fantasy because it's like old contemporary, like Priscilla said, because I don't know what the world's going to look like in 2022. So I can't even write to it. So I have to write like a version of the world that I know is not entirely accurate. That's maybe takes place in 2019, you know? I do think what Alicia says, like, I think that maybe my next book, when I have more of an idea of what it looks like, because I do think this is going to have long lasting effects. And I think a lot of us are going to have some PTSD from this. It's so overwhelming right now. I think of all the stuff it's affected, I think, but I think once we kind of come out of it, there's no way it's not going to affect the way the world is. And when you're writing contemporary, I think it's going to have to play a part in it. But I just, like right now I'm writing a book that comes out in 2 years. I have no idea what it looks like 2 years from now. It's so weird because normally when you write contemporary, because you don't want a world built, that's how I feel. And now I'm like, okay, in this alternate timeline, like, there's no COVID and my kids have gone to school this whole time and you know, everything's fine.
Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, and I think, you know, I agree with all that stuff about COVID. I think looking at just sort of contemporary in general, I do sort of always make sure, my husband asked me about this actually, because if there is a sex scene, there's a mention of condoms or there's a mention of this. And my husband was curious if my editor made me put that in. And I said, no, that was stuff that I just figured was common sense that you would just have in there, not to like kill the mood or bring, you know, everything down or anything like that, but just because I feel like that's realistic. And you're kind of doing a disservice to readers. Like if you all of a sudden are like, and they don't even have to think about it or worry about it, it never comes up. Like that just doesn't feel real to me. So I always,
Which is like a good point, because I think a lot of readers who started reading romance started reading as teens.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I grew up in a very small, isolated town where like we didn't have sexual education. Like that was not taught at all in my middle school or high school. So I think a lot of readers definitely get their first, I don't know, sex health lesson sometimes from the things that they choose to read.
And it just normalizes it. That, yeah, you should have this conversation and men should be having the conversation and nobody should be weirded out by it or put pressure on you. Like it just normalizes it so that if there is maybe a teenager reading it, they think, okay, this is normal. This is how adults behave. Just a little thing like that, I think is helpful.
So Ryan asks, do you often balance realism and suspension of disbelief in figuring out situations for your characters? How do you know when you're pushing too much of one element?
We have a lot of coincidences happen in our book, and I think some readers just go with it and they're happy because it is like an homage to like a Nora Ephron type of situation. And then other times a reader might say, this was too much. And I'm like, that's all right. It works for me in a rom-com setting. Maybe if it's a different style of romance, then I might have other expectations. But if it's within sort of the trappings of that particular subgenre, I usually am more than happy to go with it personally.
I think this is when it's good you have beta readers. You know, so like my sister, who's in here causing trouble in the chat, I see. But she is an avid reader, so she's my main beta reader brainstormer, but also then I have several author friends that we'll swap with to kind of to get that feedback before I send it to my editor and she goes, what are you talking about? Or what are you thinking, right? So I think it's important to get, because sometimes you can be too close to your book or to your characters and you don't realize it. It is, Ryan's right, there is kind of like that fine line, but at the same time, I want it to be believable. Even I want it to be fantastical in a way that the reader feels like they were swept away into this story. But at the same time, I don't want my reader at getting to any point where they're closing the book or they're closing the app or whatever, because they just can't go along with the situation or whatever that the character is doing. So in that sense, I try to trust my beta readers to be honest with me. That's why we beta read each other, that I either push too much or maybe I haven't even gone far enough, in a sense, in some way. So their feedback helps.
I think like what Sarah said, like we do have a lot of like tropes and coincidences and funny things that we wrote because they were funny, but we also always try to stay true to the characters. Like we try to make the characters true, and how they would react in that situation was true to who they are. So I think that's kind of where the balance comes for us in this book. Like the realism was from the characters. Like Zoe has a lot of anxiety and she's kind of has an agoraphobia happening in New York, and that's very real. And the subway is very overwhelming for her, and like it starts out as kind of like, why is this overwhelming? But then when that's like a serious moment in the book. But then, it's like, they work with these like ridiculous companies, have ridiculous bosses. And, we wrote some absurdist comedy stuff that we just wrote because we thought it was funny. But I think it works, like Sarah said, in that genre. And I think because the characters still react to it like they would if they were real people, even though what's happening is like obviously a lot of coincidences and, 3-act structure and stuff that normally wouldn't happen in real life.
I would say it's probably like a mix of their motivation behind why they do things, right? And could be key to make it more believable. And also like what you guys are saying, I think of like some of the rom-coms that we, or the comedies that we like The Office or New Girl or any of those like silly things happen, but we kind of like expect that to happen to those characters or expect those characters to do that. And so we roll with it because that's kind of the genre. So it's kind of a mix of what you know, what Sarah and Sarah were saying is it's a genre convention in some way sometimes. And then also it's the characters, if we make them believable enough, if we make if their motivation for doing that crazy thing, even if I as a reader I'm like, girl, do not do that, right? I might be saying that as I'm reading it, but if the author's done a good job, then they've motivated, and I understand why she's going to do that. Even if I would not want to be doing that, I can understand why she thinks it's the right reason to be doing that crazy silly thing, you know, or whatever it is. So it's probably a combination of both the genre and character motivation.
Farah, how do you feel with your barbershop quartet?
Yeah, those are such great answers. Yeah, I think that's it. That the way that you create the characters to make their reactions believable. The barbershop quartet thing was really funny because a lot of people are like, how can you write a barbershop quartet hero? Like they're old men wearing suits. How does that work? But that's not entirely true. Obviously, I didn't know that much about the barbershop quartet world before I decided to immerse myself in it to write the story. But I did some research, and they're not all old men wearing silly suits. Actually, at my book launch, we hired a barbershop quartet to sing at my launch, and they were all young, handsome, young guys. Had a red beard, and so I was like tickled pink by the whole thing. But so it does exist. I think the genre convention is really the thing that helps, that people expect those coincidences and things like that. One of the interesting things with my next book, with Engaged, is there's a lot of connections with their family. The guy's family knows the girl's family, and then they find out, oh, my uncle knew your, know this family friend, and it just layers on where they think that they're just two separate people, and they realize all these connections that they have going in their families. And I think some people, I had some feedback that sounds a little, that's a great coincidence. I'm like, no, in our community, it's actually not. In small knit immigrant communities, everybody knows everybody. Like you can go back and everybody is your dad's best friend, and that totally makes sense. And so a lot of things that people might feel that doesn't work, that's not contemporary, or that's a really convenient coincidence that his dad knew his brother's son. I'm like, no, that's a different it's a different culture, and that's how things work in a lot of these close-knit immigrant communities. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way of looking at it.
So Kara asks, as I get older, I find myself wanting to read about older characters finding romance, 40 plus. Do you think older heroines and heroes will become part of the increased diversity in romance?
I hope so.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing some. I haven't written any yet, but I'm of that age and also not attached. So I would enjoy reading romances of, and I do have ideas, but I haven't written one. But so, in answer to your question, yes, I think I think more and more, it's more likely that we'll see that. I'm hoping if you're out there writing one right now, please submit it, yes, or self-publish it. I would love to read it. So I'm on board with that.
If you'd like a really good older romance, I highly recommend the graphic novel Bingo Love by T. Franklin. It's about these two Black women who grew up in a southern town and fall in love, but obviously can't be public about their relationship. So they reunite years later when they're like old. I think like they're in their 50s or 60s, and like fall in love, and it's just so cute. So I highly recommend Bingo Love. It's a sweet graphic novel about like second chances with an older couple. So read it.
Yeah, Royal Holiday by Jasmine Guillory has 50-something leads, and I loved it. I really hope we see more of that age group.
Mm-hmm. Forgot about that one.
And I think Olivia Waite just came out with a historical romance, The Care and Feeding of Waspish Widows. I think both heroines are older. I think I
Okay.
think. I don't know.
It was a two heroines, but I didn't know their age. So that
I
would
think
be
they're older. Don't quote me. I just.
But check it out. Check it out, though.
Any final questions for the authors left? This has been a great conversation.
Fun. Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Wonderful.
It's also like a who's who of authors in the audience, too.
Yeah. It's so great to see all like familiar names on the chat.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say I see Farah Rashan. If you have not read The Boyfriend Project, it is one I highly recommend. I love it. It's a great girl. Like she's got a great girl group. I want to go to Margarita Night with some girlfriends, but Daniel, the hero in The Boyfriend Project, I'm not technology savvy at all, but he could he could whisper computer information in my ear all night long and I would be fine. I would just be fine.
And Farah's also fantastic on panels. I got to see her when she came to the Boston Public Library. She does great stuff. So if you see a romance panel and Farah is on it, definitely watch it.
Tiff was in here. So Tiff Marcello, any of her, she wrote women's fiction for a gallery. Any of hers I've loved as well. So
yes. Just a reminder that Belmont Books is selling all of these titles. They do ship, I think, just around the US. Or if you're in the greater Boston area, you can do free curbside pickup. And several of the authors from this week and today have supplied like extra goodies and signed book plates. So we have signed book plates and swag from Helena Hunting, who I did an event with on Thursday. Priscilla has sent some stuff. Tash Skilton, they've both sent postcards and bookmarks and signed book plates. Scarlett Peckham, Kate Bateman, and I think Vanessa Riley is also sending some stuff in. So we have a bunch of cool stuff. Thank you all so much for coming. This has been fantastic. Please support these wonderful authors. You can also pre-order Farah's upcoming title through us as well. We have a pre-order link up.
Can I say one thing I'm supposed to say when you're done? Can I say one thing that I keep forgetting?
Yes, go ahead, Priscilla.
Oh, okay. So I have the cover for book 2 in the Keys to Love series, and I'm going to share it first with my subscribers to my news and notes email. So if you'd like to get a sneak peek at the cover for Anchored Hearts, it's Ana Maria's the sisters' second chance romance, then you can go to my website, prisoliveras.com.
Do you know when it's dropping?
When they're dropping the cover?
Yeah, or when you'll be dropping it in the newsletter.
Oh, I will, like later next week, I will. So if you want to sign up for this week, I won't send the newsletter until like next Friday. So you'll get a little sneak peek of book 2's cover.
Thank you, Priscilla. Any other plugs from the other authors? Don't want Priscilla to one-up you with all of her.
Well, I was supposed to say this the whole time, and this is my third panel. The first time I said it. The other two, right at the end, I'd be like, oh man, I forgot. I was having so much fun. So
But thank you all so much for coming, for being here.
Thank
It was
you.
wonderful to talk with all of you.
It was really lovely to meet the other authors and to meet you, Amanda. Thank you so much.
Yes, and if for anyone who came in late, we do record the events, which go up on our YouTube channel, so you can always catch up with what you missed.
Nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
Out there, wherever you are, and thanks.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.